Nothing Personal starts in 30 seconds. It's just business. This is Nothing Personal.
Here you go. Here you go.
Prudent. That's the Nothing Personal word of the day. It is Monday, February 24th, 2025. Today's episode is brought to you by DraftKings. DraftKings, the crown is yours. Prudent. We are talking about a letter from Commissioner Rob Manfred to the owners, all 30 owners in Major League Baseball, when they were alerted the news that ESPN and Major League Baseball would no longer be partners. Prudent. What would you say when I told you? What do you think about? To me, what I think about when you use the word prudent is that you are trying to do something that is in the best interests of yourself or others, but then you decide to do something else that may have the opposite impact, and you say, well, that may not be prudent. The commissioner chooses his words extremely carefully, way more carefully than most people do. Background, lawyer, labor lawyer, working under Commissioner Selig, takes over baseball, Commissioner Manfred does, 2014, 15, year by year, executes, implements, changes in a landscape where media dollars matter more than ever, where you're having the absolute erosion of local broadcast revenue, which is the fuel that has driven baseball to success and set revenue records year after year after year. We found out in a letter that somehow appeared in public. You know from watching Nothing Personal that the way letters appear in public is they're leaked. Why would either an owner or the commissioner's office want you to see a letter that was explaining to owners why, after all of these decades, ESPN and Major League Baseball had, quote, mutually opted out of the final 3 years of their national broadcast deal? Owners and anyone else paying attention to Nothing Personal, you certainly knew well in advance that ESPN and Major League Baseball were going to be done as broadcast partners. There was an opt-out after the 2024 season, March 1st of 2025 specifically, right before the 25 season was going to begin, as part of a longer-term deal that was signed in 2021. There was an opt-out. An opt-out provides what? You know this. An opt-out provides, if it's one way, that's not mutual, a one-way opt-out, when a player has it, it provides the player an opportunity either to be overpaid by the team that he's on because he's hurt or stinks, or to negotiate a new deal with another team and make more money because he outperformed the contract. An opt-out, when a player has it in a contract, never works for anyone other than the player. Any deal in any business that has opt-outs is the same thing. If it's a one-way opt-out, you either can use it for leverage in a negotiation, you can use it to get out of the financial obligation if you are a payor of rights fees, if you're a payor of anything and you have the right to opt out. If you have agreed to join a gym where you pay a monthly fee for a 12-month contract and you can opt out after 6. If you opt out, you don't have to pay for the next 6 months. However, you can't work out in that gym. Does it mean that you get fat, drunk, lazy, and stupid? No, it means that you're changing gyms. When ESPN and Major League Baseball put the opt-out in, that's because Major League Baseball said, we're getting $550 million from ESPN. The world is changing. Flexibility seems to be an important thing when you're trying to maximize revenues in a changing media landscape. You've heard John Skipper, you've heard me and Pablo Torre talk during the sporting class about opt-outs. You've heard us talk about media contracts, length of media contracts. You've heard John Skipper directly say, we liked going long. Owners liked it because they had guaranteed revenue streams, but boy, did we like going long because it locked in a rights deal for us when we know that rights continue to go up, not down. Whether it's with the SEC, the ACC, or Major League Baseball, it is a huge part of the negotiation thinking about term. So the opt-out comes. Do you think ESPN and MLB mutually decided to opt out of their TV deal 2 days ago, 5 days ago, 1 week ago? When you know you've got an opt-out coming. We've talked about it with collective bargaining agreements, for crying out loud, Meatloaf, where there's an opt-out of a CBA and you start talking about that renegotiation years in advance. MLB and ESPN both knew that the opt-out was coming and that the opt-out was going to be exercised not just by ESPN, but also by Major League Baseball. Now you've got to think about the reason, both sides, what they do. Let's start with ESPN. Their view, and they told you in a press release, we're opting out of our TV deal with Major League Baseball, and they talked about fiscal responsibility. It's always a good one when they're trying to make you think, $550 million, that's way too much. We cannot possibly justify that. We are Disney and we are about profitability. We're about bolstering our stock price. Meanwhile, the left hand of ESPN is telling you that they're starting a direct-to-consumer ESPN. Wait, let me think, Coca. I'm gonna get this right for people. I want to make sure it's totally right. Because when you're starting a new flagship initiative and you've poured what is hundreds of millions, probably more, into the start of it, and then you realize, wait a minute, we've got nothing to show. We literally are going to show curling. That's a little shout out to my friends up north in Canada. You remember when I was with the Expos and Réseau des Sports said they'd rather show curling than baseball. You need to have content. But ESPN is telling you we're covered. Somehow we will find something to show during the summer when we are asking people to pay a monthly fee for our new, unbelievably announced by Bob Iger and everybody else at Disney, this amazing flagship, Jimmy Pitaro. We are so proud of what we're doing. Meanwhile, we'll do it without baseball. Maybe ESPN was saying to itself, no, we're going to opt out of this deal with Major League Baseball, and then we're going to do a renegotiation. Put a pin in that, and let's go to the baseball side. Baseball looks at the $550 million, and they say, I assume we can do better. Let's go find out. Major League Baseball spends its time negotiating, talking, schmoozing, understanding who the potential partners are who would be interested during a season where the other leagues aren't playing. Not all the other leagues. There's still WNBA, but let's talk about football, basketball, baseball, hockey, just for purposes of this conversation, please. Summer has always been the time when baseball is providing hundreds of hours per team of programming. 162 games, what used to be 3 hours, but we'll still call it 3 hours for purposes of this conversation. That sort of inventory is simply the best, Tina. So, Major League Baseball is out looking. They're looking for a partner. They're deciding, is there a way that we can do better than ESPN? And if so, we're going to have quite an interest in this opt out. What you didn't see in the Rob Manfred letter was a disclosure of what that next moment will be, what the next deal would be. What you did see is the commissioners say to the owners, we're going to have news within weeks about a better situation, a better broadcast deal for a package that ESPN took for granted. We all know, because we've argued with John Skipper about it while I was in baseball and since I've been gone and have the opportunity to work with him. Baseball to ESPN was like the person you take for granted, and then you realize when they leave, wow, I needed that person way more than I thought, or I needed that item. Quick 1-minute side note about taking things for granted. We all take our health for granted. We all take how we physically feel, how we mentally feel. We take our partners for granted. I take Coca for granted until all of a sudden Coca's not there on a random Monday morning, and he's here today, so it's not that day. And then you say to yourself, wow, what do I do? It's very easy to think that there's better out there. And Coca, I don't think that about you. God knows that. But it's easier to think there's something better out there. It's like trading up. Oh, I've been with this person too long. I've been doing this job too long. The grass is always greener. The funny part about the grass is it's got the same tint no matter what side of the fence you're on. ESPN is about to find out that the color of the grass during the summer on the baseball diamond, oh, I could take this all night long with James Earl Jones. The grass is going to be the same color, except they're going to miss it so badly. And why do I think that ESPN is going to miss baseball? Because for those of you who think that this was simply a negotiation where ESPN and MLB are going to cut another deal and there'll be more inventory for the same money, more jewel events, more possibly playoff games, postseason games, NGTH, it's not going to happen. The next thing you're going to hear is MLB with a new broadcast partner. How interesting that will be. I would like to point out that ESPN is going to tell you that there are financial reasons. They're going to tell you that they will be fine and they will fill up the programming. MLB is telling you that they're going to be fine. Who's got the ability to prove how it's going to go after a relationship ends? Both sides. MLB will be able to prove it very simply. When they announce what the new deal is for the package of available inventory, we're all going to know, because word's going to come out what the value was. And you can bet your sweet bippy that they're not going to announce a number below 550. You know how we'll know about ESPN? We're going to have to find out during investor calls, during earnings calls, whether they dance around the truth or they give you sub numbers. How many people are taking advantage? What's going on with the number of homes where regular ESPN is, which is obviously a declining number? The number of homes with ESPN, the home of baseball, Sunday Night Baseball, the number of homes that actually get to see on ESPN decreasing. We're going to have that number. We're also going to know how many people have migrated over to the new platform. It's a fascinating standoff that took place. And the end of it was the quote unquote mutual opt out statements where ESPN talks about how grateful they were for the long-standing relationship with MLB. Give me a break. Great list would be the word that I would use as a president of a team for 18 seasons. But don't worry. They're telling you that they applied fiscal responsibility that helped make ESPN an industry leader. All good. They were telling you, by the way, just on a quick Monday side note, I'm not shilling for the commissioner or for Major League Baseball. I'm not shilling for ESPN, wondering where my next contract's going to be with Coca. Not at all. I'm just trying to give it to you to make sure you understand why you're seeing conflicting press releases, announcements, and leaks, because somebody's going to get this wrong. When you announce a mutual opt-out, if both parties don't end up improving their lots, then someone got it wrong. And if both parties were going to improve their lot, you'd have a new deal, except there's not going to be a new deal. ESPN wanted you to have it leaked out. Hey, Apple only paid $85 million for their rights deal. Roku, for crying out loud, $10 million. I've never seen an apples and oranges leak as bad as this one, ever. God, do I love hyperbole. The Roku deal of a weekly game, the Apple deal, the Friday night deal, the package that ESPN had what people want, home run derby, postseason. We'll talk more about all-star breaks later in this show, I promise. But you can't compare the size of a small little carved out, made up extra package that MLB did to add value and bring in more media money. You can't compare that to a package that includes jewel events postseason. It's laughable. And the crazy part is that when things like this happen, you find out people's true colors. Wait to see when I tell you something's going to happen. And if it does, great. If it doesn't, fine. We're going to have a couple wait to sees today, I believe. The wait to see about the ESPN MLB deal, wait to see. This is not a negotiating situation where they're going to make an announcement holding hands together saying everything's great, we're good, we have a brand new deal coming up. MLB and ESPN will not renew. It's done. The irony is that there are people out there who are going to try to convince you that this means something it doesn't. Scott Boras, the agent in Major League Baseball, is on a media tour. Scott Boras is on a tour to try to convince you and try to cover up his failings as an agent. Scott Boras is out there giving interviews about teams not spending enough money. He's giving an interview explaining that Major League Baseball is years behind the other leagues in their media rights deals. He's out there trying to tell you that the people negotiating for Major League Baseball are dolts, are incompetents. Have you ever wondered why as spring training is beginning and games are starting to be played? Way to go, Juan Soto, home run, first at bat. I'm sure that was exciting to Mets fans. Scott Boras is out there. Do you think he's out there because he wants to teach you something? Do you think he's out there to explain what revenue sharing is and why he believes there's 6 or 5 teams with payrolls below $100 million? Or do you think he's out there to make sure that players are seeing him advocate for them? Or do you think he's out there trying to explain to you why it is that he can't get long-term deals for players like Pete Alonso or Alex Bregman? I'm going to let you decide while you hear what he was doing and where he was doing it. His quotes about the TV deal in Major League Baseball. I don't want to tell you that they are actionable. It's not slander. It's not libel. It's simply idiotic. He went and said that the most important thing we need to talk about is revenue, because revenues make everybody happy. This is a quote from Scott Boras. It increases franchise values. Let me stop there very quickly, Scott, and just give you a quick nugget. Sports teams don't trade on revenue multiples. There are many industries, Scott, you're right, like your agency, that may trade on a multiple of EBITDA, and they look at trailing revenue and look at future revenue and realize that there's no great future revenue because your ability to be a power broker in Major League Baseball is diminishing. But sports teams don't trade on that. Thank you. Scott Boras then continued The NBA TV contract tells you that we are a decade behind in our negotiation for media rights in baseball. The solution, he continued, is a negotiator. What do you mean by that? He's out there telling you that we have double the content, we have higher ratings, we get half of what the NBA gets. Does that not tell you, quote, that it's not the product, it's the representation? Scott, do you have an audience of people who tell you everything that you want to hear, who genuflect in your general direction? When you say that what Major League Baseball did when they sold their streaming rights, when everyone else was trying to acquire them, and he tries to convince you that BAMTech and MLB.com was actually something that MLB mishandled, I would like to clarify that for the audience and remind them when MLB.com started, there was another company that was within MLB.com that was running back-end tech for other sites, including its own. And Bob Bowman and his successors, up to and including the people who worked with Bud Selig and Rob Manfred, actually put money in owners' pockets because they created a value of a company and then sold that value to, get ready, John Skipper. Now, have I admitted on the Sporting Class that I would have liked to have gotten more money? Yes. Am I telling you that John Skipper got a great deal, though he would tell you it wasn't him, for what the backroom tech was of BAMTech? No doubt. I was there when the decisions were made for those deals. It had nothing to do with anything other than value that was created and then monetized. It has nothing to do with our media rights. We did not give up media rights. We did not give up streaming rights because of the deal that we did to sell that decade ago. Scott Boras has it completely wrong. And it's like he's allowed to talk without anybody questioning what he says because he's Scott Boras. It's mind-boggling to me that anyone would look back or just take his word for it, that what we did as an industry, it's like impugning our intelligence and our wanting to maximize dollars that we would get as an organization or a league by saying that we took an asset and then sold it at a number that was inappropriate. Let me give you one caveat. Have you ever sold a house and then said, wow, the house is worth more today than it was when I sold it? Have you ever sold a stock and said, that stock went up after I sold it? Have you ever had any asset where you have monetized it, you have gotten better than a good deal for yourself at that time, and then you looked back and said, oh, if I had just held it? We all do it because of X. We all do it because of the media, because people will tell you, if you had bought one share of Microsoft in 1969 and you had held it today, you would have $10 million. We're all really good at giving you that math equation because we want you to feel badly about things that you do, and we are manipulating you because it's not nice, it's not right. You can do it with anything, except where are the stories about when it went the other way? Where are the stories about the asset that you sold or monetized that then all of a sudden became worthless or useless to the buyer? Where the seller got off with a fantastic situation. When Scott Boras is telling you that we should have an NBA type media deal in baseball because we have more games, we have more regular season games, and that we're doing a bad job. What's the difference between the NBA and Major League Baseball right now? If you had to come up with it quickly, what would you say? Just out of absolute curiosity. Would the first thing that comes to your mind by chance be the length of playoffs? Coca, tell me when the NBA playoffs start, just between us. What do you think? End of April? When do the NBA finals end? Just while we're talking. June. Do you know that baseball's postseason is October and that the NBA's postseason is practically twice the length? Do you know that the value of an MLB broadcast deal is in the postseason and jewel events, not much in the regular season? Do you know the NBA is the same thing? Do you know that NBA ratings are declining and no one cares because that's not how value is derived or measured by the companies or the leagues? There is so much misdirection happening. It happens with media companies. It happens with leagues, and we cover it. It happens with agents. It happens in every business that you're involved in, that everything you do. It happens in everything we do in the podcast world, in the audio video world with YouTube and likes and downloads. Everyone is trying to figure out how to make everyone else believe that what they have is worth more than the market actually says it's worth. The reason I'm so worked up, I'm not really worked up, but the reason why it matters is that so many people look at information that is online. They read a tweet, they read a stat in a newspaper, and they then act as though what they've read is accurate without learning about the base assumptions, without learning about why something is being written. And you use it for a concept that I love reminding you about, which is confirmation bias. Confirmation bias is when something happens and you say, of course it happened because of what existed or what happened 1 minute ago, 1 day, 1 week, or 1 year ago. I told you so. Goes back to the middle school playground. The problem with that today is there's so many people giving you so much information that is so wrong that we're all believing is right and then acting as though it's right, which then gets us further and further away from truth, further and further away from progress, further and further away from peace. It gets us further and further away from the thing that matters more than all the things I just mentioned, truth. And what happens when you get far away from truth is you can't get it back because you can't find your way. And then you just decide to continue to act based on the lie that you will convince yourself was a truth. Scott Boras is just the most recent vessel I have of this happening. He's just a really good vessel for it. ESPN, all the leagues, all the networks, all the media companies, social media, mainstream media. Don't worry, it doesn't happen with any other companies. Let's take a break, Coca. I want to get back and talk about something. Baseball spring training started, and while I was gone for the week, thank you for all the sit downs and for listening. Thank you to Pablo and Freddie Gonzalez, Danny Cannell. That was a fun one. Hank Azaria, thank you for paying attention to the sit downs. We are obviously now back live and 8 a.m. Eastern, DraftKings Network at 10 a.m. Eastern. So much happened while we were gone. After the break, we are going to talk about Steve Cohen and the start of Mets camp and the things that he said to you, the fan. They were interesting. We'll talk about it when we come back. Timothy Chalamet. That was my Adam Sandler imitation. Did it work? Chalamet, Chalamet. I can't. I'm terrible at all that. My voice is my voice. Welcome back to Nothing Personal. I watched the SAG Awards last night. Yes, I did. The Oscars are coming up this Sunday. No Meadowlark Oscar watch party this year. But if things happen the way I suspect they may, look for an Oscar party next year. But this year, no watch party. But just follow me at David P. Samson on X. We'll be posting stuff. We'll be watching such great movies. Don't listen to Coco, who says there's not one good movie to watch. Not one. I think he liked Transformers, the cartoon. Last night was the Screen Actor Guild's Award. SAG-AFTRA, that's a union. I cannot believe the people who are reaching out now. Maybe they're completely out of practice that I have an 8 o'clock show. Folks, 50 minutes a day for now. Please, if you can, leave me be. I get distracted easily. The biggest thing about the Screen Actor Guild Awards is that if you win a Screen Actor Guild Award, is it a correlation to an Oscar, or is it a gift that you give to somebody when they're not going to win the Oscar? Same voters. Adrian Brody's been winning Best Actor for The Brutalist every single award show, but last night, Timothée Chalamet won for A Complete Unknown, a movie I reviewed and told you to watch. And the reason I wanted to bring it up and review the SAG Awards, which were live on Netflix, think about the words I just said. The SAG, I almost said SCAG. The SAG Awards were live on Netflix. Thank you. Best Actor was won by Timothée Chalamet of A Complete Unknown. I would like you, if you can, to find a way to go online and watch his acceptance. Timothée Chalamet said the quiet part out loud, and he is my new favorite actor. I've always loved him from Love the Coopers, Call Me By Your Name, Dune 1 and 2. He is HOTTT. He took the microphone and he said, I want to be the greatest. And winning this is another step on the way to being there with the Marlon Brandos of the world. People were slightly aghast at someone saying that they want to be famous, they want to be great, and that they work to win awards. Most people just say, oh, I'm not in it for that. That's my kind of guy. When we win Best Business or Best Baseball Podcast, or when we have accolades that come with a contract or with being paid to do what we do, I admit that matters. And Timothée Chalamet did as well. Side note, you got 1 week left to watch the Oscar movies. Get on it. Who remembers me talking about Steve Cohen, that he's not going to run a payroll where he's losing 10s to 20s to maybe over $100 million a year, no matter how rich he is? Who remembers when I talked to you about the depreciation and the tax benefits that are used by new owners when they buy a team in order to be able to have losses for the first 5 years, but they're really not losing money because of the tax situation? Who read an article that Donald Trump, the president, is trying to potentially close a loophole whereby owners get to depreciate all of these assets when they buy a team, called the owner's loophole, and he's trying to close that loophole? Who remembers when I said, when Steve Cohen tells you 3 to 5 years to win a World Series, that was not an accident? Steve Cohen met the media beginning of spring training, as all owners do. If I had a 2-hour show per day, maybe I could get into talking about some of what the other owners said, including our owner in Florida, the new owner, Bruce Sherman, not so new anymore. 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25. 8th year as owner. But I'm going to focus on Stevie Cohen. Because when he met the media, he needed you to understand that the current payroll that the Mets have, which is over $300 million, which is over the Cohen tax level that the commissioner and the other owners did not believe anyone would go over, and now 2 teams are, Mets and Dodgers. He told you his payroll is not sustainable or smart. Steve Cohen wanted you to understand that he is going to get below the Cohen tax, which is the 4th level of luxury tax. He was explaining to you that it is not the best way to build a team by having to go into the free agency market and the top of the free agency market every single year, whether it's signing Juan Soto, whether it's signing Pete Alonso, whether it's signing Max Scherzer, Jacob deGrom, all the things that in his mind needed to be done in order to get the best team on the field. He told you that he wants to be more measured in his payroll. Why is he saying it? Is it a coincidence that here we are entering the end of the period where it makes sense to have any losses at all? Is it important for him to know that the way he's operating within Major League Baseball, he's one with the Dodgers 2 of 30 owners, that they could find themselves on the short end of a labor argument, owner v. owner, that would render him and what he does no longer powerful? The differentiating factor is not David Stearns. It's not anything other than the ability to spend the type of money to cover mistakes, which all teams make. Coca, someone sent a tweet last week when I was away with an all-star team of Marlins that are on other teams now, pointing out all the different mistakes that I and others who have run the Marlins have made. And I would only tell you, as I told that person, that I would like you to do that exercise for all 30 teams. While it always feels badly about your team, every single team has made mistakes with trades or signings. Very normal. The biggest difference between small payroll teams and large payroll teams is the ability to cover those mistakes. Hey, that guy didn't work out. That guy got hurt. We've got depth. We can sign someone else. I never had that luxury. You make a mistake, Wei and Chen, and all of a sudden you're buried. Steve Cohen wanted you to make sure that you knew that he can finance whatever payroll he wants. It is true that he's worth tens of billions of dollars. But guess what? He's not going to. But then he said something that would make Mets fans all drool with anticipation. He wanted to talk about someone else's player. There's a rule out there. Do you know what the rule is? You're not allowed to talk about someone else's player. That's called tampering. Do you think someone from baseball's labor department reached out to Steve Cohen and said, do yourself a favor, stop talking about Vladimir Guerrero? Don't get me started on Vladimir Guerrero. Vladimir Guerrero, who spent time telling you as a Blue Jay that he would never, ever play for the New York Yankees and has now changed his mind. Well, I was just kidding. Of course I'd consider playing for the Yankees. Why? Because he's going to be a pending free agent and he needs whatever number of teams, Yankees, Dodgers, Mets, to need a first baseman or need a third baseman or need a DH in order to get more money than the Blue Jays were offering. Steve Cohen telling you that Vladimir Guerrero is a great player. Who wouldn't want to have him? When Pete Alonso was signed to only a short-term deal because Scott Boras made a mistake and overplayed his hand about Pete Alonso. Do you think any of this is a coincidence? That Pete Alonso has an opt-out after a year. There's a free first baseman who's available in free agency, who's younger and a better player than Alonso. And Stephen Cohen is out there saying, who wouldn't want Vlad Guerrero? The people running baseball teams and owning baseball teams, they, for the most part, have been super successful doing other things. Steve Cohen's a great example. Unbelievably successful in what he's done outside of the baseball world. Inside the baseball world, had a great run to the LCS last year. But as a successful owner, if you correlate payroll, maybe. If you correlate rings, not really. Pennants, not really. Playoff appearances, not really. Let me give you a little nugget here about what's going to happen with the Mets. Take a look at, if you don't mind, payrolls. Don't look at individual players. Measure payrolls year over year, team by team. Scott Boras would tell you that there's 5 teams under 100 million, and that's a problem for the industry. That's not the right way to examine it. You look at what team by team revenues are and the issues with local broadcasting and gate revenue, etc. Don't look at attendance, look at overall ticket revenue. When you're looking at payrolls for the larger market teams, are they being reallocated to fewer players? Does this ring a bell to anyone? where the middle class of players is disappearing and the upper end of free agents are getting paid, but the middle and the lower class of free agents are getting passed over for young players, minimum players, pre-arbitration and early arbitration year players? This is not unique. It's been going on for a quarter of a century. The only epiphany that Steve Cohen gave you when he met the media was making sure we all remembered how wealthy he is. I want to talk about the NHL a little bit. I want to congratulate them for the Four Nations Cup. It happened while we were away. I hope that you watched USA versus Canada. Many of you did. There was a game Thursday night, a gold medal game. No, not the Olympics. No, it wasn't Stanley Cup. It was the Four Nations Cup. That is a very, very important cup. People want it. It's been around for a very long time. This is the first annual Four Nations Cup. 9.3 million of you watched it. It's a big number. I mean, it's not quite the 20 million plus who watched the Olympics or the World Cup, which is hundreds of millions, but it's still really good for the NHL. And people have been losing their minds talking about how great things are going with the NHL because they did the Four Nations Cup instead of the All-Star game. And I don't want to yuck on anyone's yum because I watched it too. But just out of curiosity, was any part of you interested in USA versus Canada because of what's going on politically right now? Were any of you watching to see whether or not people in Boston were going to boo the Canadian national anthem or whether people in Montreal were going to boo the American national anthem? Were any of you watching because there were 3 fights in the first 9 seconds of the first game the two teams played together? Were any of you watching because of patriotism and pride? I don't care why you were watching, just happy you were because it was cool. But out of the 9.3 million people, I did a little poll, just a tiny little poll. Man on the street type of thing. Can you name 5 players on the USA team that just played in the Four Nations Cup? I took the donut, baby. The donut. It's the same number of Marlins players or Rockies players that people can name. It was the most watched non-Olympic hockey game on record. There's no question. It had more people than any Stanley Cup game, and you really are in a bind when you make an announcement like that because it points out that, hey, what we're doing now is really amazing, but it also points out that the biggest thing of your league, the Stanley Cup, is not actually popular. And I love watching hockey. I am not in any way impugning what hockey is doing, what they're trying to do. I'm merely telling you that you've got to pay attention to when things are announced, how they're announced, and why they're announced, and then what they actually mean. The NHL is not going to back this up with another Four Nations Cup. They're going to do a World Cup of hockey. They're going to try to launch that and then have the Winter Olympics and then a World Cup, all in an effort to raise their ability to have jewel events in order to get more money in media deals. Call back, start of the show, which is why I say the NBA has a small problem. Because the NBA's mid-season jewel event, the season tournament, that's pretty good. Maybe. All-Star Weekend, an unmitigated disaster of watchless crap. I would like to tell you that I made a mistake about Mac McClung. He's a really good dunker. Amazing to watch. 3-time champion. He looks like he's my size. 3-point contest with the star balls and the extra point balls. Congratulations to Tyler Hero. Outstanding way to go. The skills competition, a total joke. Did you see, Coco, what Victor Wembanyama, and I'm sorry he's now out. It's no joke what he's out for the year. He's got the same issue, but it's a different part of the body that Chris Bosh had. It is a major problem for the NBA and the Spurs if this does not resolve itself, and I certainly hope it does, and he's back for next season. And I say the same thing about Popovich, though I don't think he'll be back. He was announced as out for the year. Remember, in November, Greg Popovich, 76 years old, had a mini stroke, and he has not come back to coach yet. It was announced he's not going to come back the rest of this season. It's already the end of February. What the Spurs did in the skills competition, go look it up. If this, one of the things, Coca, we have to renegotiate is that when we say, hey, what happened with the Spurs and the skills competition, then boom, there'd be video of them making a mockery of it by taking balls off a rack instead of shooting them into a basket, flicking them because it's a timed competition to get around the three-point line to take the shots that you can take with no care whether they actually go in the basket. And then they got disqualified. What an absolute embarrassment. And then, of course, we got to the NBA All-Star Game itself, which was that 4-team tournament with Shaq and Charles. I think they had a team of young players. Draymond Green went public on one of the networks saying this is a zero. The All-Star weekend generally was down. People weren't watching. People weren't talking about it. People didn't care. And what did you hear? No sooner than 5 minutes after the closing buzzer of the final event of NBA's All-Star Weekend out in San Francisco was, ooh, there's going to be changes. We're going to have to find a way to make changes. Yeah, that's true. My second callback of my first 50 minutes back after a week is that why would the NBA need to continue to make changes to its All-Star Weekend? What would be the interest if they already have this amazing TV media deal and they're all covered? It's going to NBC. Remember the whole thing with NBC and Peacock and Disney and Venue, all that stuff we've talked about. Why would they be trying to make it better? Wait to see. The All-Star Game next year in 2026, it'll be totally different than what the All-Star Game was in 2025. It's not just going to be a tweak. It's going to be an overhaul. All-Star Game will certainly change in 2026. Wait to see. The last thing that happened in the NBA while I was gone that I just want to make sure that we followed up on. Do you remember the whole Luka trade with the Lakers? Luka goes to the Lakers. Everyone says, oh my God, he's so fat. He's terrible. He hasn't had good games. His calf hurts. Then he's got a great game in Denver. And everyone's like, oh my God, Luka and LeBron, they're the greatest. The biggest thing about that was the trade for the big guy. Mark Williams from Charlotte, that the Lakers failed his physical. And then that trade got rescinded. Remember that? Mark Williams came out and there's a bunch of now dueling quotes and statements. The Lakers have to make it be known. Listen, we can't talk about it. It's a HIPAA situation, but man, that guy, what embarrassment. We had to fail him. Mark Williams came out and said, I failed the physical. How could I fail the physical? I played 35 minutes the night before I took the physical. Everything's totally great. Obviously, him not understanding that a physical looks at inside and you're projecting how the player is going to be, except Mark Williams doesn't have a 10-year contract. There's some interesting stuff that must have happened with the Mark Williams trade and with the failed physical. Wink, wink. Was it failed? Was it not failed? Was there something else involved? Was there a player who was upset with the trade, upset about not knowing about the trade, but he really knew about the trade, or he didn't know about the trade, and then all of a sudden wanted to make sure that certain players were there or not there? This is not me proffering a conspiracy theory. This is me telling you that for the Lakers to have walked away from the Mark Williams trade and for him to have doubled down this weekend to say physical, didn't fail a physical. Something's afoot. Nothing personal pick of the day. We did not have a pick over the past week. We are 17-19, if I can remind you. The Denver Nuggets are favored by 5.5 points over the Indiana Pacers. We are taking the Denver Nuggets. The NBA season has continued post All-Star break. It is an absolute sprint of mediocrity to the finish for the Eastern Conference and a sprint to greatness for the Western Conference. And all of it is meant to prepare you for what's coming next. And that is playoff time in the NBA. Tomorrow, we're going to be with you live at 8 a.m. because that's what we do. Remember, it's just business. I'm happy to be back. And thank you for joining me. This is Nothing Personal.